All right, we're going to get started tonight. For those of you that are joining us on demand, I'm Chesley. You guys know me from DCN, and Jeff is having a nice break. Probably not. He's probably doing something important. But tonight we get to talk about IRS compliance. I think that was why he's not here. I think he's not here because we are talking about compliance for churches.
The crowds haven't poured in yet, Chesley.
I know. I, for one, love it. I love talking IRS code and all that fun jazz. But we got StartChurch with us tonight. We got Nathan Camp, and we got Ashley White. Nathan, you're CEO. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been here for a long time and started out helping churches on the front lines and been the CEO for several years. So I'm glad to be here. We love DCN. Love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And we got Ashley White, Director of Marketing. Do you got like a really cool title of like Lord of the Sith, or is it? No, I'm just.
Well, I mean, technically I'm the VP of Marketing, Chesley, so don't tell me.
Oh, there we go. Even better. Man, I'm sorry. VP of Marketing.
No, I have the distinct honor and privilege of helping StartChurch reach out and make sure that pastors that need our help can find us. So I get the fun job of making sure that they know where to find us.
That's so good. I'm going to quote Star Wars because Nathan absolutely loves it, but he's like, I've altered the agreement. Pray I alter it no further.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So, all right. We're talking about church compliance. I know it's such a fun topic for church planters to talk IRS and all the mumbo jumbo that's legal that you obviously slept through during seminary, but we have to talk about it because it's important. And I would love to start here. Like, what is a church, Nathan? What's a church? What does the IRS see as a church?
Yeah. Hey, great, absolute loaded question out of the gate.
Right.
So when you're asking about what is the IRS, how does the IRS define a church or whatever? Let me just start by, can I just say how I think God defines it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
God is defining the digital church as a legitimate extension arm gospel movement. I honestly believe, I was telling you a little bit about this before you get started. I really got into this movement a little bit by hearing a guy cast vision about what could be and should be about reaching people digitally. And he was way over my head. I didn't understand a lot of the things he said, but I recognized Holy Spirit movement in his life just to say, this guy has a passion to reach people for Jesus. And I just really could resonate with his missional heart. And so before we get into the IRS, I don't want to be the guy that didn't first stop and say, this is the Lord. I think the Lord is using this. I think the Lord is using digital churches to reach people legitimately for Christ. So before we get into what the IRS says, because it's not always great, God's big thumbs up. So that's where I'm at on that. As far as the IRS, great question. So the IRS years ago started trying to define what churches. They'll say, we won't define. We're not going to say who is and isn't a church. But in, I think it was 77, they actually came out with what they call the 14-point test. It actually became a 15-point test, but trying to define who's a church, because you can imagine the crazy stuff they get trying to become tax exempt as a church. You know, we're a church and it's just wild. So because of that, a lot of times the IRS, when they're trying to define, especially something new, they're trying to put handles on it. A lot of churches, believe it or not, that even people that meet physically, they won't pass that 14-point test. Sometimes in the test are like, do you meet regularly? So a lot of churches that say, hey, we meet once a month, or we meet every other week, or these sort of things, they actually get challenged in that definition in one of their 14-point tests. But I think what's happening right now, historically, the IRS they haven't caught up with the Godspeed yet on the digital church. And so what they've done is they haven't defined it as a church, they've defined it as a religious ministry. And so there's some differences, which I can talk to you about, if you'd like me to go through that. But the IRS at this point is saying a digital church is a religious ministry, still can get tax exempt status, still can ordain individuals. There's a few nuances in its reporting and some of the gifting that it can do. But that's where it is right now.
Yeah. So when you say nuances, all I hear is paperwork. Ain't that right?
Definitely
90s every quarter. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's definitely part of it. There's some form, So here's the thing, like when you look at the difference between a church and a ministry from taxation purposes, right?
Yeah.
Which I know everybody gets fired up about. There are some differences. For example, a church doesn't have to disclose its income. You know, they're tax exempt. They don't care if you have $6 billion. There's no taxation requirement. They're not even in reporting. A religious ministry, however, has to fill out what's called Form 990. It's essentially a tax return for the ministry. They don't have to pay taxes, but they have to report taxes. That is a fundamental difference that happens. If you don't file those, they'll send you a nice love letter after 2 years, and they'll make sure you file them from then on out. But they have other couple things, you know, a local church, when they're defining a local church, they'll give you up to 27 months to file for your tax exemption, your tax exempt status, your 501c3. They don't let that happen with religious ministries. You're supposed to file right away. And in fact, even at the state level, Chesley, there's some states that will respond differently to a religious ministry versus a church. Places like Texas, if you call yourself a church, they'll pretty much give you certain tax exemptions right away. But if you're a religious ministry, they wait until you've proven that you've got your 501c3. And then here's the big one. A church can receive up to 50% of someone's income as tax-free. So if I donate up to 50% of my income to the local church, I can receive that tax-free. For a ministry, it's 25%. Now, in many, many years of doing this, I've never seen anybody saying, I got a guy that wants to give 51%, you know, like Moses, you've given enough. But those are some of the differences I'm seeing.
Obviously, you know, that's music to so many church planners' ears that they have to do more paperwork. But what's cool, I know Mark and I were talking a little bit about this today. Are there differences for people that are parts of denominations that are doing this through doing church planting, or is it? I'll give you an example. Like denomination I'm a part of, we have a blanket 501c3 for the denomination that church plants come under. Are there differences there?
Only locally. You know, from a compliance standpoint, there's really not. You still have to apply, you know, still get your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, that sort of thing, but you do come under what's called group exemption, which Chesley, they're not really doing anymore. So if you're a part of a denomination that has that, and that's a real benefit, it's cheaper and you don't have to apply for it from there. But there are some local, again, nuances with the denominations itself, each one having some different responsibilities. I haven't really seen them talk to the digital church area yet. So a lot of the denominations that we're a part of, I haven't heard them speak enough to it, you know, to say these are the real differences they're wanting. You know how usually it is, it's reporting, it's finances, it's theological alignment. Like that.
Yeah, that's good. You were talking about Austin and being at the Leadership Network or Exponential Ventures. Mark was one of the presenters.
I remember him.
There. So yeah.
That's awesome. Lux Church, right? Is that was that what? Yeah, I was first time. So Mark, I went to that event down there, me and our COO, and that was the first time I was really exposed to real legitimate digital church missions, discipleship, and it was a great event. Something I walked away with a new passion for seeing people reached in a new way. So I heard your thing is awesome.
Yeah, Ventures in Austin was great. We had the chance to go to Nashville too. Chesley, tell me when I can ask questions.
You can ask a question. He said if it's broad, cool. If you want to know how to get you know, a specific tax return based off of a gift, then he's not going to be able to answer.
Can I give my email address and then I'll answer whatever I can. Yeah. My direct email address is nathan@startchurch.com. So it's real easy. No gatekeeper, no assistant that weeds all that stuff out. I'll try to answer what I can. Now, I'm not an attorney nor the son of an attorney, so this is not legal advice, but I will try to get you connected with somebody if I can answer it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've been through a whole bunch of these hoops over the last year or so. So as you can imagine, super fun. We filed for our 501c3, I don't know, a couple weeks after we started holding services, probably within the first 2 months of us holding services. The federal government took 14 months to get back to us, something like that. And then they wanted me to get back to them in like 48 hours. It's not really a two-way street on that.
Yeah.
So here's my question. So we are recognized as a church by the state of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
So our church is entirely online. We've sent out the stuff. We've done our articles of incorporation. According to the state of Pennsylvania, we're a church.
Yeah.
So when I went to file with the federal government, of course, I got rejected as a church,
Right.
went through that, learned the hard way, the 14 check marks of what makes a church a church. In the end of the day, we actually hit all of them with the exception of the fact that we didn't have a physical location that was available to the public. And so if we didn't have basically a sign in my front yard that said, you're allowed to come to my house, we weren't able to be considered a church. So we had to file in the end as a charitable religious nonprofit.
Yep.
So is there any sort of conflict that comes about there whenever we're recognized at the state level as a church, but at the federal level, we're recognized in terms of our 501c3 as a charitable religious nonprofit? And we have to do the form every year, all that.
Did they give
stuff.
you sales tax exemption in Pennsylvania? Is that
Yeah.
how it works? You have best of both worlds. A lot of states won't do that. A lot of states won't recognize you as a church until the 501c3 recognition letter comes in. So you have the best of both worlds. A lot of Florida and Texas and some of those sort of things. So you actually have it better than a lot of people do have it. I do want to say this. I believe that's going to be changing, not your particular situation, but I believe, and I was talking to Chesley earlier, that mass and speed is going to increase into momentum for the digital church. So it used to be one-off, like we have 110 employees at StartChurch, and we would have somebody call in and say, I want to start a digital church. And our team would be like, we do digital churches? You know, like this was years ago. Now it's more and more people coming along and saying, this is what God's called me to do. And I believe, you know, Mark, you guys are some first through the wall. But as more and more people write in and file and more people do it, I think we'll eventually see the day where it's recognized by the IRS. But there's no particular conflicts for you because you actually have the best of both worlds. Most people would have a conflict and say, you know, I can't get recognized, even though I'm a church, I can't get recognized at my state because the federal won't recognize me.
Yeah, our state recognized us probably a year before the federal government sent us something back. They didn't really have a problem in PA. We literally had to run an ad in 2 newspapers to let them know that we were starting a church. We just sent a picture of it to some random email and they sent it to us. So it was pretty easy. So here's my next question is one of the things that we've kicked around and considered was finding a local physical church here that would allow us to hold physical open door services on Wednesday nights during the same time as we do church. We literally have a volunteer boot up a computer or a TV, show our service live and open it up, and then refile with the federal government with pictures of our sign and pictures of our gathering, showing we're a digital church, but this is where we physically gather. Our doors are open to the public and people can come and gather here. And there's nothing stopping them, no matter who they are, what they're doing. Is it wise for us to potentially, because I thought about doing that, and then I know this is being recorded, but then like literally once we got the church paperwork and they don't ever check up on you ever again, like then just shutting down the local physical place that we weren't doing for any reason other than to get that qualification. Is that wise? We haven't actually gone through the whatever the 1099 thing is. I know it's not a 1099, whatever the tax form is that I have to do. We haven't done that yet.
So those are several loaded questions, Mark. I want to, I would say first off, if you don't file your 990s, that is going to catch up with you. Okay.
Well, we are going to file that. We just haven't had to do it yet because we didn't become a 501c3 until this year. So this upcoming December, January will be the first time we have to do it.
So here's what letter 941 that you get from the IRS after you apply for the 501c3 essentially is saying, hey, if you stay doing what you're communicating to us, we'll recognize you as a tax exempt organization. If anything fundamentally changes, you need to let us know. In other words, your 501c3 recognition is the beginning of a conversation, not an end. So that would be a real challenge if you presented yourself as we're a church with a physical location and then applied, they approved you, and then you shut that down. That's a fundamental change that you would actually have to refile with them. And so I would highly recommend you don't go down that path.
No, that's helpful. That's really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
And just a note, Mark, if the reason is because you guys are apprehensive about the 990, at StartChurch, we can help you guys get your 990 filed. there isn't value in risking the impact that you guys are making in your community over not knowing how to do a 990. StartChurch is here. We can help. We have tax experts. Like, we can do, this is what we do, because a lot of churches don't know how to do the 990. They don't know how to do these forms. They're confusing. There's a million hoops to jump through. That's literally why we exist.
And that's why we're partnering, because I don't ever want to know how to do a 990.
The one thing I want to learn.
Yes. So obviously we skipped down a couple questions because I was about to ask the question that Mark basically asked. And, what's the difference between operating a ministry, which is what we're calling a digital church right now, and a church?
Well, I think first off, just as we started off at the beginning, it's legitimate, right?
Yeah.
You are a local church. Doesn't care what the IRS says or anything. It's the called out ones, called together, spiritual family, doing missional work. So I say that again to say, so then you need to take it as you're legit. I hear a lot of people who are like, well, we're just, those, right? Like, well, we're just, and so we don't need to. But I encourage you and anybody who's considering planting a digital church to go ahead and give yourself the credit and validation for who you are, and also back that up with the adherence. So you're a church and you're a ministry just like anybody else. You have the same responsibilities. People ask, so how do I start a digital church, right? From a compliance standpoint, it's essentially the same exact way. Most people right now are choosing to incorporate. So they're filing a corporation. It does give them a limited legal liability. You may have gatherings. You may have your leaders coming together from time to time or whatever. There's a lot of great benefits there why people would choose to do that. Also, if you want to file for your 501c3, there's wording in that early documentation that's going to actually align for that long term. So, taking that first step, getting an EIN. I tell you what happens, what I foresee struggles for a digital church is we're just, right? We're just this. And so they don't go get an FEIN, a federal employer identification number. They just kind of use their own PayPal, their own Venmo, Cash App for tithes and offerings, sort of put it in their account as a line item, and say, we're only spending this for the church. And I totally believe them. The IRS will 100% say that is income. And if you get audited and they go, what's that 10,000 that is sitting in there? And you say, oh, that belongs to the church. That is income to them. And it looks like you avoided taxes. Bylaws, very similar way. Like, if you're a digital church, count yourself as legit. Count yourself as legit on ordaining ministers. Like, people are going to need to do weddings. People are going to be visited in jail. There's a lot of those things that being ordained. So if you want them to have a legitimate ordination, not just spiritually, but a legal ordination, go through the process. Make sure your bylaws are written in such a way that can recognize that. And I can talk all day what that looks like. And then, of course, filing that 501c3, getting that recognition, because you may be digital today, and who knows, I'm seeing a lot more people start digital and then have a hybrid reality to it. Hey, we meet virtually, then we meet personally. Well, there's a lot of benefits if you have your tax exempt status, first for your donors, and then for if you get property, and so I would just say a lot of those kind of compliance things are just no-brainers. Like, treat yourself like you would have brick and mortar and what you would require of yourself. And then from there, Chesley, I'd really talk about, and Ashley, you may be able to jump in on this, but how you pay yourself, how you pay your staff. Mark, as you're growing in staff and all this sort of stuff, there's taxation requirements, right? There's contracts. There really should be a contract between the minister and the ministry. This is, hey, in consideration for services rendered as a pastor, we're going to pay you. It's only the church that's like, bring everybody on staff, no contracts, no written anything. I mean, that's just not the way to do that. So I would protect myself, treat the organization like it is legit. You need to have board meetings, have them over Zoom. Great. The Digital Millennia Act says you can do that, no problem. But take board meeting minutes and show that you're using your board. One thing we're finding is, a lot of churches will incorporate and they'll say, here's my board, myself and two other non-related people to balance the board. But then they never have board meetings, right? Or they have board meetings and they don't take notes, they don't take minutes. And here's what happens if they were ever to be audited by a rather aggressive attorney. the attorney or even the IRS could say, we can prove your tax exempt status by your minutes. This is what's happening in courts right now. Give me your minutes and I'll be able to tell if you're adhering to section 501c3, right? And a lot of guys go, we don't have any minutes. We had prayer meetings, God moved, we have the word, and they say, we appreciate that. It sounds like you had really good fellowship, but you didn't have a board meeting. And so you actually leave your organization open to potential litigation and problems in that. So I say all that to just say, treat yourself like you're valid in the eyes of the Lord, in the eyes of the law, lead it in such a way that has that compliant stewardship and you'll be fine.
I'm going to ask. Oh, go ahead, Ashley. I'll ask later.
Look what happened with Venmo. I mean, they're taxing you to pay your babysitter. I mean, that's the reality. The IRS said, whoa, 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 too much money is going through Venmo. Like the IRS is going to make those things happen. And, we're moving to online filings and we can see the momentum that way. The IRS is fully aware of the digital church, the digital movement. There some of the other ways that a digital church can protect themselves that you can immediately think of is like, how's your social media going to be used? What kind of content can people post? What kind of language and verbiage is appropriate? Like if you don't have those conversations with your staff and you're not clear about, hey guys, we don't it's your personal social media, but we all know that we're a digital church. And so your personal social media represents the church. So don't post political statements or even something as simple as your children's pastor who's got kids. They post a picture of their kids playing in a bathing suit. Like there's a million things that can happen on social media that as a digital church, your bylaws and your policies, those things are going to protect you in a way that sometimes the physical church doesn't think of. How are you going to respond to an angry comment on social media? Well, and also have you talked to your congregants about that? Like, is it okay for a member of your church to get in an argument with somebody on social media on one of your, there's so many places that a digital church needs to protect themselves. Physical churches need to do that too. They've got Facebook pages, they've got all of that. But when you're doing ministry solely online, being intentional about these policies are so important in protecting yourself and protecting your church so that you can continue to grow and have the influence that God's calling you to have.
I'll tell you something interesting here. So again, so this feels like bad news. Let me just pause and say, if you use wisdom on the front end, none of this stuff is going to be hard, right? It's when you try to reverse engineer into this. So hopefully a lot of people are listening to this and they're on the front end of this journey and they can get it right. And it's nothing to fear. It's just something to have wisdom about. I know of a church that was having a picnic and one of their local people said, hey, I got a boat. I'll bring the boat out and I'll give people rides in the boat. And they're like, great, it's a tiny brand new church plant. Well, in that experience, they went to a local park. They were driving people around and a girl got hurt, a real hurt. She hurt her back real bad. Because the church had put boating on their flyer, they were responsible. So you can imagine what happens after there's like $100,000 of medical bills that were up in the air. Why do I say that? Even digital churches that encourage hybrid reality, get a big TV, set it up, invite your friends, bring your kids, you can begin to take on liability if you're not wise. And if you're, you won't have insurance or, it's no big deal. And you hold yourself out there. And I would just encourage you to be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove, right? We usually have the dove thing down. Like we're humble. Let's be wise. There's a wisdom in this hour as we're kind of carving some new missional frontier here. Let's be wise and protect essentially what God is calling us to lead.
Yeah. If I can throw out some theology here, that's not just wisdom, that's shrewdness. I'm pretty sure the Greek for that is shrewd.
Yes.
Got to think like a lawyer.
That's right.
So no, I do have, I guess for entertainment value or whatever, I'm thinking about the idea that we're kind of the first through the gates on this. And I don't know if you read The Innovation Stack by Jim McKelvey. He was the co-founder of Square. So they go through, they realize as they are creating and inventing Square, they put it in the cell phone and they run a card, they actually are breaking the law because, they had some laws with the big 4 credit card companies.
Yeah.
Partnered with Washington that they wouldn't be able to do anything outside of a POS system. So they actually take it to Visa, put it in the CEO's phone, slide the card, and it clicks to him like they just broke like 17 different laws that are felonies right there. And so he's like, wait a minute, that just happened.
Yeah.
Gets on the phone call with a congressman, and they start rewriting the laws because they had the ability to think forward enough to go, oh, hey, if I can get this in somebody's hands that understands this, then I can actually begin to change the narrative, which will change the rules.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you guys have been waiting in that space. I know you guys do a lot of policy work and a lot of helping churches navigate that. But what are you guys doing or are you guys doing anything on the other side of that, helping communicate with guys that don't have a clue what digital and church is?
Yeah. Well, let me just say this. You're right. You're first through the wall. Guys like Mark, guys that are really doing it you are first through the wall. You know how that is. You get bloodied, you get banged up, you get misunderstood, right? The IRS, I believe, will most ardently be affected, not by us just applying over and over, but by the narrative, the local church narrative, adopting that. So as we start adopting, here's what our church is, here's our church plant strategy, here's our 10 digital, like we work with a large church plant organization, and third quarter of last year, half their churches launched digitally. I was a church planter. It blows my mind, right? So it's still blowing my mind, which means for the IRS, we might as well be talking in hieroglyphics, but there'll be a day, there really will be a day if we keep at it. I think content out there is super important. The IRS is not a Christian organization, but there are people within there who are working, who are representing, who are able to go up and say, I've got an application here. This is legit. And keep saying that over and over, getting that theology out there, getting that content out there. As that happens, the narrative will change. I don't know how long that takes. A lot of times it takes right now 18 months to get your IRS application back. I know they just hiring 87,000.
Yeah.
87,000 new representatives. I don't know about you. I don't feel warm and fuzzy about that. But eventually we keep saying it. Eventually we stay faithful to the narrative. We keep aligning it with scripture. We keep recognizing it. As those applications land, there's going to be people that go, I got to take this to my book. Listen, this is legit. This is a church.
So we should title this, Why the IRS Should Legitimize Digital Churches.
Absolutely.
That'll be a great SEO.
Right. 5 views on YouTube.
Hey, Chesley, you mentioned denominations earlier.
Yeah.
And earlier this year, I had the chance to fly to an Acts 29 conference in Baltimore. And Acts 29, they're pretty with it. Those guys are pretty hip. And in every single breakout session, the question was like, well, how do I deal with the people that won't come to church, but they'll watch stuff online, or I can slide into their DMs, but I can't get them to have coffee. And I think as Digital Church Network and partners with people like StartChurch, and we continue to impact the denominations from both sides relationally, as denominations start to see the legitimacy of the digital church, as content arises, as we continue to template and help the digital church succeed. I think, the IRS can't ignore the Southern Baptists. They can't ignore those denominations because they're massive and they're huge. And so the more that we make progress within our own community, that's when we see the external world start to change. So I think where we win first is within our communities, and then we'll see the world's view start to evolve and change, because when we're not unified, they're not interested in us. But as we unify and we're moving forward, that's where we win.
And somebody, Chesley, can have litigation about it.
I know.
Somebody's not going to file their 990s.
Yeah.
You're going to get a nasty letter from the IRS. Oh, this, and they're going, that's it. I'm going to sue. And they'll sue over the definition of a church. And that's what,
honestly, I was already online looking at the ACLJ and going, I wonder if that's the fastest way to get this taken care of.
Yeah. ADF does a lot of that great stuff too, representing the church, the Alliance of Defending Freedom.
Yeah.
Those guys tend to step into those spaces and are like, bring it. will represent you. So
So the moral of the story as a church planter is just have a better lawyer. That's what I'm
that's all. 5 things you need: bylaws, and lastly, an attorney. I really think, listen, I know we're talking about the digital church context.
Yeah.
I'll zoom out for a little bit. I've talked to a lot of thousands and thousands over the years. And I know nobody likes this. I know, a lot of times I've been on a call with a church planter and they get a little ticked at the end. They go, how come I learn more in 20 minutes with you than in all my years of seminary? Because nobody's really even talking about this, right? But it really is important. It's super important when it's important, right? Writing in your bylaws, people defining who is the pastor, who's the final say on polity and ecclesiology. If you don't have bylaws with that, what stops somebody else in the congregation says, actually, I think I'm the pastor. I think this is my group, and the old go on vacation and the doors of the church are locked. I don't know how that works digitally, but, protecting yourself on the front end, making sure you have this all situated right, then you're real confident, then you're real confident moving forward. Most of it from there is maintenance, just adhering to the right things.
It's easier to get into a locked door than it is to a Facebook group that you've been removed as an admin on. So I feel like
that. Yep.
more important, because let me tell you, getting
She
access.
just went there.
We
That's
made
a
that
digital
mistake,
example.
and let me tell you, it took me a month to get out. Like for the digital church, some of this stuff, it can sound initially like, well, that doesn't apply to me, but it does. So much of this applies to the digital church. I'm not going to say a lot about it, but StartChurch feels really strongly about this. We're headed, we're working, a part of our mission at StartChurch is to develop tools and resources that help all church planters. And we're headed towards a new tool that really helps church planters of all kinds. And one of them being digital church planters, because these steps still matter. These steps are still important. These steps are still valuable. One thing, Nathan, I'd love for you to talk about, what if they started off wrong? Like, what then? What if they're already started?
Man,
Like,
Ashley's taking over my job. She was going exactly where I wanted to go.
I know. It's those 8s in us, Chesley.
Yeah, I know, man.
I love hearing Nathan talk about how we can help churches get right. So I have to ask.
Yeah.
No,
So
awesome. Thank you, Ashley.
great question. Truth is, when I do anything like this at any sort of conference or anything, inevitably Q&A time, somebody says, what if you didn't do all of this? And I'm asking for a friend, a lot of people have friends that didn't take the steps. The great thing is, Chesley, most of this, you can actually course correct. There's a couple of things where we joke around and say, you got to plead the blood because there's nothing you can do, just Lord, hide me under the shadow of your wings kind of a thing. But let's say you're sitting here and you're like, we've been going 2 years. We don't keep any board meeting minutes. You can do a ratification of prior acts meeting where you basically sit down and say, we didn't know, we had meetings, but we didn't record them properly. You can go through a ratification of prior acts and say, to the best of our ability, here's when we met, here's who was there, and this is what we voted. The IRS tends, if you do that before an audit, they tend to take that as, okay, then you're compliant. If they're in the other room counting receipts and you're like, come on, y'all, we need to have a board meeting, that's not gonna, that's not gonna flow. Even let's say that you have missed, even if you have missed specific steps, a lot of times you can go back, you can go back and say, we didn't know, we want to adjust that. We want to do even a reclassification, what Mark was talking about. If you get a building, for example, or something like that, you can be reclassified from a religious ministry to a church. So there's a lot of work that you can do. If you don't have bylaws, some people will get approved at the state level. And remember, the state, they'll approve a bar, a barber shop, and your church in the same hour. They don't care. They just hope you're spending money in the local area. But you may realize, hey, we never adopted bylaws. You can do that now. You might have a unbalanced board. It's supposed to be yourself and 2 other non-related people to be on the board. Okay. A lot of times you find out, we ask, who's your board? It's my wife and I. There's some real problems with that. You can balance that. You can have a board meeting. You can invite the right people in. I just encourage you, take it seriously. You can really affect your ministry. You don't want to do it when you're under fire and under pressure. We have no bylaws. This gal says she's the new pastor. I don't know. They want to change the polity of what we believe. And I think it's really critical about having your written doctrines. This is what we believe. The days of going, it says it in the Bible, so it's not clear to a lot of people. You can't just point to the Bible. So I would say that a lot of times churches need to have a written doctrines, sheet that really says this is what we believe about all of these things. There's some real hot topics right now in our country. What does your church believe about that? Is there anything that your church, even digitally, is prohibited from doing because we believe the scripture says we can't do that, right? Now, a lot of physical churches have some cases where people want to use their buildings for things they believe are not according to the scripture. Well, what does your bylaws say? If your bylaws don't say anything about prohibitive activities, you basically are seen as just discriminatory, right? So you can really go back and take a look at your church. And this is what I encourage you to do. Take a look at your church and say, have I missed any of these steps? Am I receiving income? And I never really did I never did get a contract. Did I ever file for my 501c3 paper? Am I giving receipts? All of that kind of stuff. And again, I know nobody's like, this is where the revival breaks out, when we talk about the compliance, but you sure will know it when you do it wrong,
True. Yes. I really love, the wisdom here. I think one of the biggest things that you are hitting at is, especially those of us first through the wall on the digital side, we don't get the luxury of not understanding the business side of church anymore.
Yeah.
We better be good at that. I know seminary didn't prepare us for that. And so there's only a couple ways you can figure this out. You can actually do the hard work of reading up on it, or you can have a guide through the process, which is probably better anyways. And that's what you guys provide, I'm guessing, right, Ashley?
Absolutely. That's what we are here to do. The reality is that everybody has a unique situation, an individual mission that they're running towards. But StartChurch has been here for 20 years. Like, we've worked with all different kinds of churches, all different kind of ministries. One of the other things that Nathan hasn't mentioned is, as your digital ministry grows, maybe what that looks like is that in some of your local areas, you've got several people that live in the same area, and they want to create a CDC that's for pregnant women in the community. Like, what do you do there? You still have to go through that tax exemption process. What if you want to use all of your recording equipment and rent it out as a stream of income for your church as a for-profit arm? That is still a process that you have to go through. So digital ministries, while it's in this newer phase, there's tons of places where it's going to grow. We have to look at, for digital, we know digital follows physical. Well, at least for now. Soon it won't. Soon it'll be what leads. But that's the way that it is. So we know that churches start as a church, and then they'll have CDCs and they'll have for-profit arms. And there are steps that have to be followed each time. The good news, they're similar to the steps that you start when you start a church, but there's steps that you need to follow that are important. And StartChurch is here to walk you through all of those. StartChurch, this is what we excel in, and this is where we're experts at. We have a full team that just does this day in and day out. So that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you started shifting towards CDCs, which are community development corporations, obviously in the digital space, where you're going to have new streams of income.
Right.
You guys are really actually on the forefront of this, have been for years, on alternate income streams for churches, because you've been seeing the writing on the wall for a while. I would love for you guys to talk a little bit about that with a little bit of the time we have left. What does the church need to do with new ways of sustainability, like finding sustainability income wise? What's your input? What's your thoughts?
Well, I love the entrepreneurial spirit that I find in most church planners, right? Again, this is a new generation. In fact, we're actually starting a new generation of church planners. The previous one that's been here over the last, say, 10 or 15 years, they came in with a very entrepreneurial spirit about them, right? And so they also know that the local communities that they're in don't just show up to church because the Bible says we should show up for church now. It's certainly, they don't believe, hey, we tithe or give. A lot of that stuff is still really new to a very post-Christian group a lot of times. And so they don't want to be dependent upon that, right? And they certainly don't want their vision reduced to the size of what their only church can give. So a lot of them have become very entrepreneurial. I've seen people who, you know, I was a set up and tear down church, right? So we set up and tear down in a movie theater, we tore down the whole thing. And then a lot of that sound equipment sat in a trailer until the next week. We're finding people starting event companies where they're able to utilize those great sound systems and lights and all of this sort of stuff. And it actually makes them revenue during the week. I know a local church that's about 3 miles from here who, and you'll love this, because if I was a digital church, I would be doing this right here, okay? So they have a great production. And their online production is killer. They have great staff. They actually started a for-profit arm of their church where other local churches come in during the week and film their entire service using their facility, lights, everything, every week, several churches, and they give them the handed product and they play that. Most digital churches, if you're really doing the deal, right? You know, light years more than the average church, right? I mean, COVID really showed us who's on the front end and who's on the back end of change, you know, of being on the cusp of what needs to happen. In fact, I don't know if you ever heard of the book Predictable Success, but I was interviewing Les McEwen the other day, and he has the arc. Okay, he says you start out where it's struggle, then you go to fun, and then it goes to white water. Everything's chaotic because it's working. Then you go to predictable success where things are happening. But if you don't continue to change, you start going down. You start going to the treadmill, you start going to plateau, and then ultimately the death rattle. And I said, what happened, Les? What was the impact of COVID on different organizations? He said it was like a wind blew in the top. And if you went accelerated, if you were climbing, you went back. But if you were already a little dying, it sped you up. We know of churches that had, when they couldn't meet, had zero income because they thought the only way you could receive tithes and offerings is an envelope. The guys and gals who are out there leading churches who are already doing text to give and all of that, they did fine. I say that to say, you're so far advanced. The people that are watching this, you're so far advanced. You could start a company that helps other traditional churches figure out how to do a legitimate online expression. That is a no-brainer because it's right in your wheelhouse. It's right using your giftings and where you are. I think that makes all the sense in the world. But for-profit arms are just a key staple, I think, to the next generation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Obviously, Mark, you were hitting on some of the stuff that I was thinking about recorded Zooms and if those would work. Ashley said the transcript, like pull the transcripts off of them.
Yeah.
Because right now the video doesn't work, but the transcripts do.
Yep.
Yeah, be safe than sorry. The reality is that we live in a world where the government's never going to be friendly to who we are and what we believe. And so we want to help pastors be wise. And so use the technology available to you. Yeah. Download the transcripts, make sure that you have them on hand. You don't have them now, start. Like, make sure that we cover. Do I think in the future Zoom's going to suffice? Everybody works on Zoom now. Most of us have remote jobs if you're bivocational that we work on Zoom. The IRS has people working from home. Let's be clear. The IRS has people on Zoom. Like, that's the reality. However, that doesn't mean they'll give us the same grace. So do your due diligence and making sure that you're using technology to your advantage. Yeah. Nathan, Mark asked a question about house churches and other locations.
Yeah.
While you can't be able to answer the specific, can you talk about what does it look like to have a multi-site, especially if one of your other sites is in another state? What does that look like with your EIN?
I saw your other question too about revenue from different
revenue from Twitch and stuff. Like, that's a big deal for us.
Questions.
Yeah.
I love that you're asking those. Yes, first off, digital planting outside of state. That's really going to come into play if you have any staff. You know, our staff's all remote now. We were all in a physical location, had a bunch of people, COVID happens, next thing we're in all these different states. Well, there's employment ramifications for that. We just opened Tennessee as a nexus. So there's real implications for you. I think there's also real implications for you collecting finances and doing business in another state. A lot of times, Mark, people have to file what's called a foreign entity. And they say, well, we're headquartered in Georgia. We have arms in Tennessee and Texas. And that's where we're a foreign entity. We're always going to be headquartered here, but we are doing business in these other places. That's called a foreign entity clause. And I encourage you to look into that. Just like a digital church is doing that, I would look at those as physical arms.
Yeah.
Two, you had mentioned, how do you deal with income from ads, right? So this is a really important part. The IRS says that any income from any source derived needs to be reconciled. Here's why that might make even extra importance to a digital church, because there's a such thing called a public support test. Okay, you become a tax exempt organization. One of the points is, are you mainly sustained from the public? Okay, they want to keep me from starting Nate's church and I give my paycheck to Nate and I get a tax write-up, right? They want to see it more than a family. They want to see it supported by the public. In order to do that, they keep track of that, right? If you were to ever to be audited and they look at your income and see it's too much from one family, or here's the big point, if it's too much from outside of the church. Okay, so they have actually, what's the term I'm trying to think of here? I'm blanking. It's called UBIT, unrelated business income tax.
Yeah.
Okay, if you receive unrelated business income, which would these ads would be, and it starts to creep up as a significant amount of your annual income. I don't have a number, I'm just going to throw it out. Let's say it's 10%. You could be threatening the public support test. Too much of your income is coming from unrelated business income. So you'd fill out a 990T and start paying the tax on that income. And if it grows too much, it actually can threaten your tax exempt status. So and a lot of these digital churches are going to be so good at those ads, they'll get so much funding from it that is unrelated to your business income. So
One thing to note, Mark, that's important, especially as you're talking about TikTok. Some of this stuff, if it's you as an influencer, you need to make sure that your pastoral compensation contract is like, you're going to have to identify that. Is your TikTok for your church what's bringing in revenue, or is it your TikTok? Those things are nuances in the digital world that we have to think about, because if it's your TikTok coming into your PayPal account, then you're putting it into, you've got to have all of that pastoral compensation, all of that set, all of that thought about, because you end up with those different nuances as you're an influencer. Think about, like, the guys writing books. Okay, they're writing books, it's driving money into their ministry, but it's their income that they're donating to the church. It's going to be the same thing for digital influencers, in making sure that you have set up your accounts in a way that they all fall under the church. And if they don't, then you make sure that you're either claiming that on your personal tax returns, if you're still driving that as bivocational, because that income counts. We know this, there are millionaire influencers out there. And so you got to watch out for all of that and make sure that your contracts and all of your tax paperwork is set up correctly for you individually as well as your church.
Yeah, all three of my Instagram followers are definitely not putting me in that area. So I'm not worried about it, but it is true. I love that you're thinking about that though, right? I love that you're thinking about revenue coming in and support from that. There's going to be ways to do that. And this is so new.
Yeah.
But I love it. I think it's
well,
great.
this conversation is definitely something that's going to have to consistently be held, because the ability to get revenue from a stream like that, it's going to be something that is evolving over time.
It's going to get harder.
It's gonna not that
harder.
it is already hard, but I think there's going to be some pieces to this that are going to be helpful for churches to have a regular conversation about it. Because so there's a church that I know of just a little while ago had a digital pastor, ended up doing very well in a physical church, overtaking actually the influence of the lead pastor in that space. But he ended up going to a different church. Guess what happened to the rest of the audience? It followed the digital pastor. And so those conversations you're talking about, putting these certain pieces about whose TikTok is it, whose IP is it, like these are questions that are going to continuously come up. And you guys are definitely the person that the group of people we need to help us wade through all of this. Absolutely.
Well,
Mark, you got
Chesley,
another
we can't wait to
question?
have you on our podcast to tell
Oh
us
yeah,
and
yeah.
the audience
I-
about the difference.
I know nothing about this stuff. Like, I'll just tell you about
No.
digital church.
But like, we can't wait to have you come because there's so many pastors that want to expand their reach. They want it. They want to do so much. They just don't know where to start. They have so many questions. Like, we want to hear you answer. Like, you're writing blogs for us. So shout out to Chesley for the Start Church blogs this month and next month. But in helping us and our pastors that aren't doing that understand the value of the digital church and how they can expand the mission that God's called them to through these digital platforms.
Hey, obviously we're getting ready to shut this thing down in a few minutes, but I wanted to really hone in on the partnership between Digital Church Network and Start Church. I think this is going to be super important for the future of church in general, not just digital church planters. As everything goes more digital, digital ministry will no longer be digital ministry. It will be ministry.
Ministry,
And so,
that's right.
I believe that this partnership is going to be here for a while because it's needed. Obviously, we all need lawyers after this conversation. What's that, Ashley?
You're stuck with us.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad about it. So, but I would love, Ashley, if you would go ahead and talk about our partnership, maybe tease some of the things down the line. May not be ready to let all the cats out of the bag yet, but I would love to hear more about what you and what we are doing together.
Yeah. So Start Church is super honored to partner closely with DCN. We want to make sure that every digital pastor that goes through DCN and their program has the tools and resources that they need to be successful. So as part of that partnership, we'll be granting free access to some of our online tools that we have coming very soon that we're super excited about. And then we'll also be gifting some discounts and some abilities for digital church pastors to really be successful as they navigate through the world of compliance. Because Start Church, it is our mission to see those pastors that have been called to be able to protect what God has called them to lead through the life of their ministry, whatever that ministry looks like. And so we're going to continue to partner closely with Digital Church. And then those pastors that come through Start Church that say, hey, like, we don't know anything about digital ministry, but we know it's a huge deal and we've got to get there. Start Church is committed to making sure that they can find Digital Church Network and really know what they need to do to succeed and how to really set up their technology and address the theological side of a digital church and really be successful as they plant their church and as they expand their growth. So it's our honor and privilege to get to partner with you guys.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of this partnership. Obviously, I think Digital Church Network has a lot of value we're getting from you guys. There's some things coming down the pipeline that we're going to have some pretty cool gifts for our digital church planters. So be staying tuned.
You guys are the first ones. Chesley, I think you guys are the first ones. We're literally releasing what we believe is going to be a game-changing tool in the world of church management, church planting.
I agree.
And I think you guys are the first ones to get access to it. So we're
very
super excited. You guys are even contributing. You know, Ashley told me the other day, you guys are contributing to some of the content in that tool. That's awesome.
Yeah, what little we know about digital church planting, we're going to try to help and start something. So no, we're excited about the partnership. We're excited about getting these tools out to church planters. Obviously, I think as we move in the future, this is going to be something that's going to be more and more on the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah.
I know you guys have been at it for 20 plus years, but the reality is we don't get a pass anymore. We really have to be very smart about this because people aren't going, oh, well, you're a church. It's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, it is. It very much is. Do you guys have any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to say before we close out tonight?
I want to just say, we believe in you. Like a lot of times you're doing something new, people sheepishly are saying, I'm doing this, you know, and sometimes we get people calling us and they're like, just whispering their vision. We want you to know we are a safe place. If you need to be encouraged, if you feel like you're called to do something, we want to get behind you. We believe God's at work. It's all new. We kid around at our place and say, sometimes people starting churches like a pig on roller skates. They're trying to figure it out. But I'll tell you what, if you need a partner, you need somebody just to believe in you, need somebody to pray with you, we're here. We'd love to support you.
Man, I appreciate that very much. I appreciate it very much. Ashley, Nathan, it was an honor to spend this time with you. I hope we get to do it again. I know I get to do it on the StartChurch side.
Yeah,
soon.
we get to have you. That's great.
Can't wait to have
Yeah.
you.
All right. Thank you guys.